I'm Sarah Cardona, 28, and for years my family made it clear I wasn't mother material. Too ugly, my sister would sneer. Who'd want kids with you? My mother would add with that familiar dismissive laugh. I believed them. I carried their words like stones in my chest, convinced I was unworthy of love, let alone motherhood. But as I lay in that delivery room, exhausted and overwhelmed, clutching my newborn daughter, the door opened. My husband walked in, not the struggling artist they remembered, but Marcus Cardona, whose tech company had just gone public. The same family who'd spent years tearing me down suddenly saw dollar signs. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning this moment for months. The truth about my life was about to shatter everything they thought they knew. Asterisk. Growing up in the Mendoza household meant living in Elena's shadow. She was 3 years older, blessed with what my mother called classic beauty, long, straight black hair, perfectly symmetrical features, and a confident smile that could charm anyone. I was the afterthought, the accident that came too late, with my unruly curls and what my father dismissively called artistic tendencies. The family portrait hanging in our living room told the whole story. Elena positioned front and center, her hand elegantly placed on mother's shoulder. Father stood, proud behind them both, his businessman's smile fixed and permanent. And there I was, barely visible in the background, half hidden behind Elena's perfect posture, my young face already showing the uncertainty that would follow me for years. Sarah, stand up straight, mother would snap during those photo sessions. Try to look presentable for once. But no matter how I positioned myself, Elena's radiance seemed to dim everything around her. She was the sun, and I was relegated to being a distant planet, cold and forgotten. Elena excelled at everything that mattered to our parents' social connections. Academic achievements that looked good on paper and, most importantly, attracting the right kind of attention from the right kind of people. When she brought home her first boyfriend at 16, a banker's son with a trust fund, our parents practically threw a celebration. When I showed them my first digital art piece at 13, a complex landscape I had spent weeks perfecting, father glanced at it for exactly 3 seconds before returning to his newspaper. "That's nice, Mia," he said, not looking up. "Elena, tell us more about your debate tournament." The comparison became a constant drumbeat in our house. Elena's grades, Elena's friends, Elena's prospects. My art was dismissed as a hobby, something I'd grow out of when I became more serious about life. When I won a regional digital art competition at 15, the trophy went unmentioned at dinner. When Elena placed third in a local beauty pageant the same week, we had a family dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. "You're so lucky to have Elena as a role model," mother would tell me, usually while Elena prayed nearby. "Maybe, if you paid more attention to how she presents herself, you wouldn't look so." She'd pause, searching for a diplomatic word. Unkempt, unpresentable, unremarkable. The words accumulated like sediment in my mind, building layers of doubt that would take years to excavate. Elena never directly participated in these comparisons, but she didn't need to. Her mere existence was statement enough. She was everything I wasn't, and everyone made sure I knew it. The cruelest moments came during family gatherings, when relatives would fawn over Elena's latest achievements while I sat invisible at the kids' table, despite being only 3 years younger. "Elena's going to be a heartbreaker," Tia Carmen would say, pinching Elena's cheek. And Sarah, she'd look at me with barely concealed pity. "Sarah has such a sweet personality." Sweet personality. The consolation prize for girls who were pretty enough to be HEARTBREAK arts taught by the time I turned 16. I'd learned to make myself small, to occupy as little space as possible in our family dynamic. I'd retreat to my room with my laptop and art software, creating worlds where beauty wasn't measured by magazine standards. where worth wasn't determined by others' approval. But even in my sanctuary, Elena's laughter would drift through the walls, reminding me of everything I could never be. Senior year of high school should have been my escape route, while Elena was already thriving at UCLA, studying business with a minor in what she called social optimization, essentially learning how to network. Her way through life, I was secretly applying to art schools across the country. The Rhode Island School of Design was my dream. Their digital arts program, a perfect fit for my portfolio of illustrations and web designs. I spent months perfecting my application, staying up until 3 a.m, tweaking every pixel of my submission pieces. My art teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was the only adult who ever took my work seriously. She'd pull me aside after class, studying my latest creation with genuine interest. "Sarah, this is professional level work," she'd say, examining a character design I created for a local gaming company's contest. "You have real talent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Mrs. Rodriguez helped me apply for scholarships and grants, understanding without being told that my family wouldn't support my artistic ambitions financially. She even wrote recommendation letters, describing my work ethic and natural ability in terms that made me believe, for brief moments, that I might actually have value. The rejection letter from RISD arrived on a Tuesday in March. I found it slipped under my bedroom door, already opened, the envelope carefully resealed with clear tape. Mother was waiting in the kitchen, the letter in her hands, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and false sympathy. "Oh, Mia," she said, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry. But maybe this is for the best. Art school is so expensive and the job prospects." She trailed off. Letting the implication hang in the air, I stared at the letter, reading the formal language of rejection. "We regret to inform you that we cannot offer you admission at this time. While your portfolio shows promise, we received an exceptional number of applications this year. Something felt wrong." The letter was dated 2 weeks earlier, but I was just seeing it now. And there was something about Mother's expression, too satisfied, too prepared with her consolation speech. "When did this arrive?" I asked. "Yesterday," she said quickly. "I didn't want to upset you right before your calculus test, but I remembered yesterday clearly. I've been home all afternoon, waiting by the mailbox like I had every day for weeks." The letter hadn't come yesterday. Elena got into the business honors program at UCLA, Mother continued, as if the two things were related. "She's thinking about an MBA after graduation, very practical, very secure." I took the letter to my room, studying it under my desk lamp. The tape job was amateur, wrinkled at the edges. Someone had definitely opened this before me. But why? And when had it really arrived? Mrs. Rodriguez was grading papers when I found her after school the next day. I showed her the letter, explaining my suspicions about the timing. She read it carefully, her expression growing more troubled with each line. "Sarah, this doesn't make sense. I spoke with the admissions coordinator last week. She mentioned your application specifically, said it was very impressive." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she sounded like someone who was planning to accept you, not reject you." Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out her phone. "Let me make a call." 20 minutes later, I had my answer. RISD had sent 2 letters to my address. The first was an acceptance letter with a partial scholarship offer mailed 3 weeks ago. The second was this rejection letter sent after their admissions office received a call from someone claiming to be me, withdrawing my application due to family circumstances. The room spun around me. Someone in my family had intercepted my acceptance letter, called the school pretending to be me, and ensured I'd receive a rejection instead. The only question was who died that evening. I confronted Mother directly. She was in her usual spot on the couch, watching her telenovelas, a glass of wine balanced on the armrest. "I know about the letters," I said, She didn't look away from the television. I don't know what you're talking about. Wrist, they accepted me. Someone intercepted the letter and withdrew my application. Now she turned, her face a mask of practiced innocence. That's ridiculous, Sarah. Why would anyone do such a thing? Because you didn't want me to leave. Because you needed someone to stay home and be the failure while Elena conquered the world. Mother's expression hardened. You're being dramatic. Art school would have been a waste of money we don't have. I saved you from making a terrible mistake. The admission hung between us like smoke. She'd done it. My own mother had sabotaged my future to keep me small, manageable, local. You had no right, I whispered. I had every right. I'm your mother. I know what's best for you. She turned back to her show. You'll thank me someday when you have a stable job and a normal life instead of starving in some artist's loft. I enrolled at the local community college that fall, studying general education requirements while Elena sent home photos from her UCLA sorority parties. But I didn't give up on art. I kept designing, kept learning, kept building a portfolio in secret. And 3 months into my first semester, I met Marcus in a coffee shop near campus, hunched over his own laptop, sketching character designs that took my breath away. I didn't know then that he would become my salvation. I only knew that for the first time in my life, someone was looking at me like I was worth seeing. Marcus noticed me before I noticed him. Later, he'd tell me he'd been watching me work in that coffee shop for weeks. Fascinated by the way I'd lose myself completely in whatever I was creating on my laptop screen. He said I had this expression of pure concentration, like the rest of the world had fallen away. You're working on character designs, he said one October afternoon, sliding into the chair across from me without invitation for a game. I looked up, startled. He was around my age, maybe a year or two older, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. There was something gentle about his approach, curiosity without aggression. How did you know? He turned his own laptop screen toward me. It was filled with concept art that made my breath catch intricate fantasy landscapes with lighting that seemed to glow off the screen. Character designs that managed to be both fantastical and deeply human. I recognized the software, he said, and the look. That's the expression of someone trying to bring imaginary people to life. We spent the next 3 hours comparing techniques, sharing tricks we discovered, and gradually revealing our dreams. Marcus was 2 years into a computer science degree, but spent every spare moment on art. He wanted to start a gaming company someday, something that would merge cutting-edge technology with meaningful storytelling. Games can be art, he said, his eyes lighting up with passion. They can make people feel things, change how they see the world. We're just at the beginning of understanding what's possible. I'd never met anyone who spoke about creativity the way Marcus did, with reverence and ambition in equal measure. When I mentioned my wrist rejection, he listened to the whole story with growing anger. That's criminal, he said finally. Your work is incredible. Way better than half the stuff I see from people with fancy degrees. You don't have to... I'm not being nice, he interrupted. I'm being honest. There's a difference. He pulled out a sketchbook and flipped to a drawing that made my heart stop. It was me, captured from across the coffee shop, but not as I saw myself in mirrors. In Marcus's drawing, I looked focused and beautiful, my curls framing my face like they were meant to be there, my expression showing intelligence and creativity instead of the awkwardness I felt constantly. You drew this last week, he admitted, suddenly shy. I hope that's not creepy. You have this light when you're working. I wanted to capture it. No one had ever seen light in me before. We started meeting regularly, ostensibly to work, on our respective projects, but really just to be around each other. Marcus was living in a converted warehouse space with 3 other artist friends. A chaotic but inspiring environment where creativity was valued over conventional success. His corner of the space was organized chaos, multiple monitors, graphics tablets, and stacks of sketchbooks covering every surface. "This is amazing," I said the first time he brought me there. The walls were covered with concept art from various projects, some his, some collaborative works with his roommates. "It's not much," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "I know it's not exactly. It's perfect," I interrupted. "It's exactly what an artist's space should look like." For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I kept our relationship secret from my family for months. Something told me they wouldn't understand, wouldn't approve of Marcus's unconventional living situation, or his dreams of starting a company instead of getting a real job. Elena was dating her banker's son, someone with clear career prospects and family money. My artist boyfriend with his secondhand furniture and big dreams would be seen as another example of my poor judgment. When I finally brought Marcus home for dinner 6 months after we met, the reaction was exactly what I'd feared. "So, Marcus," Father said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision, "what's your major?" "Computer science with a focus on game development," Marcus answered confidently. "I'm planning to start my own company after graduation." Elena snorted softly into her wine glass. "Game development? Like video games?" "Interactive entertainment," Marcus corrected politely. "It's actually a rapidly growing industry with incredible potential for—" "How nice." Mother interrupted, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "And what do your parents do?" Marcus hesitated for just a moment. "My father was a mechanic. My mother teaches elementary school. They're both retired now." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my family processing this information, placing Marcus firmly in the category of unsuitable. No family money, no business connections, no clear path to the kind of success they valued. "Well," Father said finally, "I suppose someone has to make those games for children." "Actually, the average gamer is 34 years old," Marcus replied, still maintaining his polite tone despite the obvious dismissal. "The industry generates more revenue than movies and music combined." But I could see he was fighting a losing battle. My family had already written him off as another poor choice by their disappointing daughter. After dinner, Elena cornered me in the kitchen while Marcus waited in the car. "Really, Sarah?" she said, loading dishes into the dishwasher with aggressive efficiency. "A starving artist? I thought you'd learned something from watching me." "He's not starving. He's talented and ambitious and broke," she finished. "Living in some warehouse with a bunch of other dreamers. Is that really what you want? To struggle your whole life while he chases impossible fantasies?" "Not everyone measures success the same way you do," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Elena's words echoed doubts I'd been trying to suppress. "Wake up, Sarah. You're not getting any younger or prettier. You need to be practical about these things." I left that night feeling like I was betraying Marcus by even listening to her, but also terrified that maybe she was right. Maybe I was being naive about love and art and the possibility of building something meaningful with someone who saw the world the way I did. Marcus sensed my uncertainty during our next coffee shop meeting. "They don't like me," he said without preamble. "They don't understand you," I corrected, but we both knew it amounted to the same thing. "Sarah, I need you to know something." He reached across the table and took my hands. "I'm going to make this work, the company, the games, all of it. Not to prove anything to your family, but because I believe in what we could build together, you and me." "Together?" "I've been thinking about it for weeks. Your design skills, my programming background, we could be incredible partners, in business and in life." He pulled out his sketchbook again, flipping to a page covered with notes and diagrams. It was a business plan, rough but thoughtful, outlining how we could combine our talents into something profitable and meaningful. You've really thought about this, I said, studying his careful handwriting. I think about you, he said simply. About us. About what we could create if we stopped listening to people who don't understand what we're capable of. Looking at Marcus across that table, his eyes bright with possibility and determination, I made a choice. I decided to believe in us, in him, in the future we could build together. I decided to stop letting my family's limitations define my own possibilities. I just didn't know then how much that decision would cost me, or how much it would ultimately save me. Marcus proposed on a Thursday evening in his warehouse studio, surrounded by the glow of computer screens and the smell of takeout containers. It wasn't romantic in any conventional sense, but it was perfectly us. He'd been working on a new character, design a fierce princess who saved herself, when he suddenly stopped and turned to me. "Sarah, I can't wait anymore," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his desk drawer. "I know we haven't been together that long, and I know your family thinks I'm a poor choice, but I love you. I love your mind and your talent and the way you see possibilities where other people see problems." The ring was his grandmother's, a vintage piece from the 1940s with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. It wasn't large or flashy, but it was beautiful in its simplicity, and the fact that it had belonged to someone Marcus loved made it precious. "It's not much," he said, suddenly nervous as he slipped it onto my finger. "But someday, when the company takes off, it's perfect," I interrupted, and I meant it. The ring fit like it had been made for me, the vintage setting, suiting my style better than any modern design could have. We were both crying and laughing when his roommate Jake walked in with a 6-pack of beer, took one look at us, and started, whooping loud enough to bring the others running. The celebration that followed was chaotic and joyful, exactly the kind of spontaneous happiness my family never seemed capable of. I waited until the weekend to tell my parents, wanting to savor the joy privately before exposing it to their inevitable criticism. Marcus and I had decided to announce our engagement at Sunday dinner, hoping the formal setting might encourage more civilized responses. "We should have known better. Engaged," Mother repeated, staring at the ring like it might be infectious. "After 8 months? When you know," I said, unconsciously echoing what Elena had said about her own quick engagement to David the banker. "That's different," Elena said immediately, as if reading my thoughts. "David and I have been together for 2 years, and we have similar backgrounds, similar goals, similar trust funds," Marcus muttered under his breath, earning a sharp look from Father. "What was that?" Father asked. "Nothing, sir." "I just Sarah, and I have similar goals too. We both want to build something meaningful together." Elena laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Building something meaningful doesn't pay rent, Marcus? What exactly are your financial prospects?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could see Marcus weighing his response, deciding how much to reveal about his startup plans, his growing network of investors, the prototype he'd been developing in secret. "I'm launching a gaming company after graduation," he said carefully. "Sarah will be my partner, handling all visual design and user experience." "A gaming company," Father repeated slowly. "And your startup capital?" "We're exploring various funding options, more silence." I could feel my family's collective disapproval settling over the table like fog. "Well," Mother said finally, "I suppose congratulations are in order. When are you thinking about the wedding?" "We haven't set a date yet," I said. "We want to finish school first, get the business launched. Oh, that reminds me." Elena suddenly brightened, her voice taking on the artificially sweet tone that always preceded her worst announcements. "David and I have news too." She held out her left hand, revealing a diamond so large it looked almost cartoonish. The setting was modern and expensive, the kind of ring featured in jewelry store advertisements. He proposed last night at the country club, she continued, not missing the way everyone's attention immediately shifted from my modest vintage ring to her ostentatious display. We're thinking a June wedding. Nothing too elaborate, maybe just 200 guests. 200 guests. Mother gasped, already mentally calculating costs and social implications. Well, David's family has so many business connections, and we thought it would be good networking. The conversation devolved into wedding planning, guest lists, and venue options. My engagement was forgotten within minutes, relegated to a footnote in Elena's much more impressive announcement. I sat there watching my family fawn over her ring, her plans, her future husband's earning potential, and felt that familiar sensation of becoming invisible. Marcus's hand found mine under the table, his thumb tracing over my grandmother's ring. When I looked at him, he was smiling slightly, not with bitterness, but with something that looked almost like relief. Later, as we walked to his car, I finally asked what he was thinking. I was thinking that your sister just did us a huge favor, he said. How? She made our wedding into a non-event, which means we can plan exactly what we want without interference or expectations. Small, simple, meaningful, just like your ring. He was right, of course. While Elena spent the next 6 months planning what amounted to a corporate networking event disguised as a wedding, Marcus and I quietly organized a ceremony in Mrs. Rodriguez's backyard with 20 guests and a reception catered by the taco truck from downtown. The ring became a symbol of everything our relationship represented: understated, authentic, and more valuable than it appeared. When people asked about the small diamond, I learned to simply smile and change the subject. Let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth about what I was wearing, just like I was beginning to know the truth about the man who'd given it to me. Marcus wasn't just a dreamer with empty pockets. He was someone who understood the difference between true value and impressive appearances. He saw potential where others saw limitations, beauty where others saw flaws. And somehow, miraculously, he saw all of that in me too, the night before our wedding. As I sat in my childhood bedroom looking at Elena's massive engagement photos covering my mother's dresser, I realized something important. I'd spent so many years wanting my family's approval that I'd almost missed recognizing the approval that actually mattered: my own, and that of the person who chose to love me exactly as I was. Elena could have her perfect wedding and her perfect husband and her perfect ring. I had something better. I had a partner who believed in dreams and the courage to chase them together. I found my wedding dress at a consignment shop 3 months before the ceremony. A simple ivory sheath with delicate lace sleeves that had probably cost someone else a fortune, but was marked down to something I could actually afford. I'd been saving for months, setting aside money from my part-time job at the campus bookstore, each dollar representing hours of shelving textbooks and helping freshmen find their required reading. The receipt, carefully tucked into my jewelry box, showed the final total: $247. I'd paid in cash, counting out the bills with a mixture of pride and anxiety. It wasn't the designer gown Elena had chosen for her June wedding, a dress that cost more than I made in 6 months, but it was mine. Purchased with my own money, chosen because I loved how it made me feel rather than how it would photograph. Elena's dress had been featured in the society pages of the local newspaper, modeled by Elena herself in what was essentially a pre-wedding photo shoot. Local banking heiress announces summer nuptials, the headline read, accompanied by professional photos of Elena posing in various locations around the country club. My wedding announcement, if you could call it that, was a small notice in the community college newsletter that Mrs. Rodriguez had submitted without asking me. Former student Sarah Mendoza to wed local entrepreneur. No photos, no details about the dress or venue, just a simple acknowledgement that something significant was happening in my life. The morning of my wedding, I woke up in my childhood bedroom for the last time, surrounded by the remnants of a life I was finally ready to leave behind. Elena had spent her wedding morning at a spa with 6 bridesmaids, getting professional hair and makeup while photographers documented every moment. I was getting ready alone, having declined Mother's half-hearted offer to help with your hair or something. I preferred it this way, actually. Standing in front of my bedroom mirror in the dress I'd chosen myself, applying makeup with the careful precision I'd learned from online tutorials, I felt more authentically myself than I had in years. This was my day, modest though it might be, and I was claiming it completely. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock in Mrs. Rodriguez's backyard, a space she'd transformed with string lights and flowers from her own garden. 20 guests, including Marcus's roommates, a few friends from school, and Mrs. Rodriguez's family, who had essentially adopted me as their own after learning about my family's lack of enthusiasm for my artistic pursuits at noon. Just as I was finishing my makeup, Mother appeared in my doorway without knocking. "Well," she said, surveying my appearance with the critical eye she usually reserved for checking produce at the grocery store, "I suppose you look presentable." "Thank you," I said, though we both knew it wasn't really a compliment. "That dress is very simple," she continued, settling onto my bed uninvited. "Elena's had so much more detail, so much more presence." "Elena's wedding isn't until June." "Yes, well, we're all looking forward to that. A real celebration. David's family is flying. And from New York, you know." The guest list reads like a who's who of local business leaders. I turned back to the mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands despite the familiar sting of comparison. "This is a real celebration too, Mother. It's my wedding day." "Of course it is, Mia. I just meant," she paused, searching for words that would sting without crossing into outright cruelty. "I hope you know what you're doing. Marriage is hard enough without starting with so little." "So little what?" "Security, stability. David has a trust fund, you know. Elena will never have to worry about money. Some things are more important than money." Mother's laugh was sharp and humorless. "That's what people say when they don't have any. Love doesn't pay bills, Sarah. Love doesn't put food on the table or keep a roof over your head." I met her eyes in the mirror. "Marcus and I will be fine. I hope so." "I really do." But when reality sets in, when the romance wears off, and you're struggling to make ends meet while he chases his little computer games, don't say we didn't warn you. She left without offering to help with my hair, without asking if I needed anything, without even mentioning that I looked beautiful. I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, staring at my reflection and fighting back tears that would ruin my carefully applied makeup. The ceremony itself was everything I'd hoped for: intimate, meaningful, and filled with people who genuinely wanted to celebrate our love. Marcus looked handsome in his one good suit, his eyes bright with emotion as he spoke vows. He'd written himself about partnership and dreams and building something beautiful together. Mrs. Rodriguez cried openly during our exchange of rings, her husband capturing the moment with his old digital camera. Marcus's roommates cheered when we kissed, loud enough to startle the neighbor's cat. It was joyful and authentic and perfect in its imperfection. My family arrived just as the ceremony was ending, having gotten lost despite living in the same town their entire lives. They missed the vows, the ring exchange, and the pronouncement, arriving in time only for the reception and the obligation to appear in family photos. "Oh, we're so sorry we're late," Mother said loudly, embracing me with theatrical enthusiasm. "For the cameras. Traffic was just terrible." There had been no traffic. It was a Saturday afternoon in a small town, but they'd made their point this wedding wasn't important enough to prioritize, wasn't worth adjusting their schedules to accommodate. During the reception, as Marcus and I cut our simple 2-layer cake from the local bakery, Elena pulled me aside with what she probably thought was sisterly concern. "You know I love you, right?" she said, gripping my arm with perfectly manicured nails. I just want you to be happy. I am happy. I hope so. It's just, well, look around, Sarah. This is so small, so limited. You deserve more than this. I looked around at the fairy lights twinkling in the gathering dusk, at Marcus laughing with Jake about something ridiculous, at Mrs. Rodriguez dancing with her granddaughter to music playing from a portable speaker. I saw love and joy and celebration, even if it didn't come with a six-figure price tag. I have everything I want, I told Elena, and for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. That night, in our tiny studio apartment above the hardware store, Marcus and I sat on our secondhand couch, eating leftover cake and looking at the handful of photos Mrs. Rodriguez's husband had printed for us immediately. In every picture, we looked genuinely happy, not posed or performative, but authentically joyful. No regrets? Marcus asked, studying a photo of us during our first dance, both of us laughing at something he'd whispered in my ear. None, I said, and realized it was true. I didn't regret the simple dress or the small guest list or the modest venue. I didn't regret choosing love over security, dreams over guarantees. I'd married my best friend and creative partner, someone who saw my worth when my own family couldn't. The wedding receipt in my jewelry box became a symbol of independence, proof that I could create something beautiful with my own resources and my own choices. Elena's expensive wedding would happen in 3 months, complete with professional photographers and society page coverage. But it wouldn't be more meaningful than what Marcus and I had built together in Mrs. Rodriguez's backyard. Sometimes the most precious things come in small packages, purchased with money you earned yourself, chosen with a heart that finally knows its own worth. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines on a Tuesday morning in March, 18 months after our wedding. I stared at it for a full minute, sitting on the bathroom floor of our tiny apartment, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing. We'd been trying for 6 months, not desperately, but hopefully, talking about timing and finances and whether we were ready to bring a child into our uncertain but optimistic world. Marcus was already at his computer when I emerged from the bathroom, working on the prototype that consumed most of his waking hours. He looked up when I cleared my throat, and something in my expression made him push back from his desk immediately. What is it? He asked, concern flickering across his features. I held up the test without saying anything, watching as understanding dawned on his face like sunrise. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the magnitude of the moment settling between us like a bridge we were about to cross together. Really? He whispered, really. He was across the room in 2 steps, lifting me off my feet and spinning me around our cramped living space, both of us laughing and crying simultaneously. When he set me down, his hands immediately went to my still flat stomach, his expression soft with wonder. Hi, baby, he said to my belly, his voice barely audible. We've been waiting for you. I made the first doctor's appointment for the following week. And when they handed me that first ultrasound photo, a grainy black and white image that looked more like abstract art than a baby, I felt something shift, fundamentally in my chest. This tiny collection of cells was ours, mine and Marcus's, a physical manifestation of the love we'd built together. We spent the drive home from the appointment planning how to tell our families, when to make the announcement, how to handle the inevitable commentary that would come from both sides. Marcus's parents, who lived 3 states away but called every Sunday, would be thrilled. They'd been hinting about grandchildren since our wedding, not in a pressuring way, but with the gentle enthusiasm of people who genuinely loved. Children. My family was a different calculation entirely. Maybe we should wait until the 2nd trimester, I suggested as we sat in our car outside the clinic. Make sure everything is progressing normally before we deal with their reactions. Or, Marcus said carefully, we could tell them now and establish our boundaries early. Let them know this is our child, our decisions, our way of doing things. He was right, of course. Waiting wouldn't change their fundamental attitudes about our life choices or their assessment of our readiness for parenthood. Better to get it over with while I was still feeling strong and optimistic, rather than waiting until pregnancy hormones made me more vulnerable to their criticism. We decided to tell them at Sunday dinner the following week, the same venue where we'd announced our engagement and endured the inevitable comparisons to Elena's superior choices. At least this time, Elena wouldn't be able to upstage us with a bigger announcement. She and David had been married for 2 years and showed no signs of starting a family, too focused on his career advancement and her social climbing to consider children. "We have some news," I said after the main course had been cleared and before Mother could launch into her usual litany of Elena's latest achievements. "Oh?" Father looked up from his coffee with polite but minimal interest. "We're having a baby," Marcus said, reaching for my hand across the table. The silence that followed wasn't the joyful pause of surprise, but the heavy quiet of people processing unwelcome information. I watched their faces, seeing the calculations happening behind their eyes, how this would affect our already precarious finances, how we'd manage childcare while pursuing our impractical business dreams, how this would further cement what they saw as our poor life choices. "Well," Mother said finally, her voice carefully neutral, "that's certainly news. Congratulations," Father added, though his tone suggested he was offering condolences rather than celebration. Elena, who had been unusually quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke up. "Are you sure you're ready for this? I mean, financially and emotionally. Having a baby is such a huge responsibility." "We're ready," I said, though I could hear the defensiveness creeping into my voice. "It's just that babies are so expensive," Elena continued, warming to her theme. "Diapers and formula, and doctor visits and childcare. And your business is still just an idea, right? Marcus hasn't actually made any money from it yet." "We're doing fine," Marcus said, his own voice tight with controlled frustration. "I'm just thinking practically," Elena pressed on. "Maybe you should consider waiting until you're more established, more secure. There's no rush after all." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maybe we should consider not having this baby at all. "We didn't ask for advice," I said, my protective instincts already kicking in despite the tiny size of the life I was carrying. "We're telling you because you're family, because we thought you'd want to know." "Of course we want to know," Mother said quickly. "We're just concerned. You're both so young, so unsettled. Are you sure this is the right time?" "There's never a perfect time," Marcus replied. "But we love each other, we want this child, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." "Love doesn't pay for cribs," Father muttered into his coffee cup. That's when something crystallized for me. Sitting there at that table, one hand protectively covering my stomach while my family dissected our readiness for parenthood like a failed business proposal, I realized that their opinion didn't actually matter. This wasn't their child or their life or their decision to make. "You know what?" I said, standing up from the table. "We should go. Thank you for dinner." "Sarah, don't be dramatic," Mother said. "We're just being realistic." "No, you're being cruel," I interrupted. "This should be a moment of joy, of celebration. Instead, you're treating our pregnancy like a mistake that needs to be managed." "We never said you didn't have to say it outright, but every word, every expression, every pause has made it clear that you think we're making another poor choice." "Well, maybe we are. Maybe we'll struggle and make mistakes and do things differently than you would. But this baby will be loved and wanted, which is more than I can say for how I felt growing up in this house." Marcus was already standing, pulling out his wallet to leave money for our portion of the dinner check. "Thank you for the meal," he said politely to my parents. "We'll call you next week." We drove home in silence, both of us processing what had just happened. It wasn't until we were back in our apartment, the door locked behind us, that I finally broke down crying, not from sadness, but from a mixture of anger and relief and fierce, protective love for the child I was carrying. Marcus held me while I cried, his hand rubbing gentle circles on my back. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "I'm sorry they can't see what I see when I look at our life." "What do you see?" I asked. "I see two people who love each other enough to take risks, to build something together, to believe in possibilities instead of limitations. I see a baby who's going to have parents who choose each other every day, who prioritize love and creativity and growth over status and security." I pulled back to look at this man who had somehow seen past my family's assessment of my worth to the person I actually was underneath. "You really think we can do this?" "I know we can," he said firmly. "Maybe not the way your family would do it. Maybe not with all the conventional markers of success, but we can absolutely do this together." That night, I carefully placed our ultrasound photo on the refrigerator next to a printout of Marcus's LATEST game design. Two images of the future we were building together, one biological and one creative, both requiring faith and patience and unconditional love to become real. I touched the ultrasound photo gently. This first portrait of our child, and made a silent promise. This baby would grow up knowing their worth wasn't conditional on other people's approval. They would know that love really could pay for cribs, even if it sometimes took creative financing and secondhand furniture to make it work. Most importantly, they would know that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that choose each other rather than the ones that share DNA, and if that made us unconventional, so much the better. Elena's Christmas card arrived in early December, a professionally photographed testament to everything my life wasn't. The image showed her and David posed in front of their new house, a colonial revival with a perfectly manicured lawn and a BMW in the circular driveway. Elena wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than our monthly rent, while David stood behind her in a tailored suit, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. "Merry Christmas from the Morrison family," the card proclaimed in elegant script. "Wishing you joy, prosperity, and abundance in the coming year." Inside, the card was filled with their year's accomplishments. David's promotion to senior vice president at the bank. Elena's appointment to the board of the local arts council, a position that required substantial financial contributions rather than any actual artistic knowledge. Their purchase of the house, and their recent return from a 2-week vacation in Tuscany. I was 6 months pregnant when the card arrived, my belly finally showing enough that I'd had to buy maternity clothes from the discount store across town. I held Elena's perfect family portrait while sitting on our secondhand couch, Marcus's prototype code running on his laptop screen behind me, the contrast between our realities stark and unavoidable. "Look at this," I said, showing Marcus the card when he emerged from his coding trance to eat the sandwiches I'd made for lunch. He studied the image for a moment, then looked at me with that gentle expression that meant he was about to say something wise. "They look like they're trying to sell me insurance." Despite my mood, I laughed. "That's terrible, but accurate. Look at their faces. They're not actually happy. They're performing happiness for the camera. There's a difference." He was. Right, though I hadn't noticed it initially. Elena's smile was picture perfect, but didn't reach her eyes. And David looked like he was calculating something rather than celebrating anything. The pose was flawless, the setting impeccable, but the emotion felt manufactured. Still, the card stung. While Elena was buying houses and taking European vacations, Marcus and I were debating whether we could afford the premium brand of prenatal vitamins. While she was serving on nonprofit boards, I was working extra shifts at the campus bookstore to save money for baby expenses. Her success seemed effortless and abundant, while ours felt hard-won and precarious. The card joined the collection. On Mother's refrigerator, where Elena's achievements were displayed like trophies, her college graduation photo, her wedding announcement from the society pages, her real estate license certification, and now this perfect family portrait. My own milestones are a wedding photo, my associate degree diploma. The ultrasound picture of our baby were notably absent from the display. Mother called that evening to make sure I'd received Elena's card, as if there was any chance the postal service would have failed to deliver such important correspondence. Isn't that a beautiful photograph? She gushed. Elena looks radiant. And that house, did you know they paid cash? David's Christmas bonus was enough to buy it outright. That's nice for them, I said, trying to keep the envy out of my voice. Elena says they're thinking about starting a family soon. She wants to get settled in the house first, maybe redecorate the nursery. She's been looking at designers, a nursery designer. While I was painting secondhand furniture and sewing curtains from remnant fabric, Elena was planning to hire professionals to create the perfect room for a baby that didn't even exist yet. That's very practical of her, I managed. Oh, it is. Elena always thinks these things through so carefully. She's already researching the best preschools, you know. She wants to make sure any children she has get the very best opportunities. The implication was clear. Elena would be a better mother because she could afford to be one. Her children would have advantages mine never would, opportunities that money could buy and planning could secure. After the call, I sat in what would become our baby's room, a corner of our bedroom that we'd sectioned off with a decorative screen Marcus had built from reclaimed wood. The crib was assembled but empty, waiting for sheets I was still saving to buy. The changing table was a dresser we'd found at a yard sale and painted white with a changing pad secured on top. It wasn't a designer nursery, but it was made with love and creativity, every element chosen or crafted by us. Marcus found me there, sitting in the rocking chair his mother had shipped from their house, running my hands over my growing belly. Comparing again? He asked gently. I can't help it. Look at what she has, what she can give her future children. And look at this. I gestured around our makeshift nursery. Secondhand everything, homemade decorations, garage sale furniture. Marcus knelt beside the rocking chair, placing his hands over mine on my stomach. You know what I see when I look around this room? What? I see parents who cared enough to research the safest crib design instead of just buying the most expensive. 1. I see a father who spent weekends building furniture by hand because he wanted every piece to be perfect for his child. I see creativity and resourcefulness and so much love that money couldn't buy more of it. He was right, but the doubt remained. Social media made it worse. Elena's Instagram feed was a curated showcase of her perfect life, David surprising her with expensive jewelry, their spotless house decorated for every season, exotic vacation destinations, and carefully arranged dinner parties with other successful couples. Her posts received dozens of likes and comments praising her taste. Her luck, her obvious happiness. My own social media presence was minimal. A few photos of Marcus's art projects, pictures of us at local festivals, images of the baby clothes I'd started crocheting. My posts received likes from Mrs. Rodriguez and Marcus's roommates, but nothing approaching Elena's level of social validation. The comparison became a constant background hum in my mind. When I felt the baby kick for the first time, my immediate thought wasn't pure joy, but wonder about whether Elena's future children would have more comfortable wombs to grow in. When Marcus and I discussed baby names, I found myself avoiding ones that Elena might choose, as if even our child's identity needed to be negotiated around her superior status. The breaking point came at a family dinner in January, when Elena casually mentioned that she and David had decided to start trying for a baby. We've got the house situation settled, David's career is really taking off, and I've done so much research on pregnancy and child development, she said. as if conceiving a child was another item to check off a perfectly organized to-do list. We want to make sure we can give our children every possible advantage. That's wonderful, Mia, Mother said. You're being so smart about this, so prepared. The contrast with their reaction to my pregnancy announcement was impossible to ignore. Elena's hypothetical future pregnancy was celebrated for its timing and planning, while my actual pregnancy had been met with concern and criticism. Sarah's baby will be so lucky to have a cousin close in age. Elena continued, her tone suggesting she was doing us a favor by timing her reproduction conveniently. If I get pregnant right away, she added, our children could even go to the same schools. Though we're thinking private education might be better, smaller class sizes, more individual attention. Private school? Another advantage Elena's children would have that mine wouldn't. Another way her superior resources would translate into superior opportunities for the next generation. That night, as Marcus and I lay in our bed next to the makeshift nursery, I voiced the fear that had been growing alongside my baby. What if Elena's right? What if love isn't enough? What if our child resents us for not being able to give them what their cousin will have? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand tracing gentle patterns on my belly where our daughter was practicing her nightly gymnastics routine. Do you know what Elena's Christmas card reminded me of? He said finally. What? Those stock photos that come in picture frames? Perfect but generic, designed to look like happiness rather than actually capture it. He turned to face me in the dark. Our life might not photograph as well, but it's real. Our love is real. The family we're building is authentic, not performed. He was right, but I was still learning to believe it. Learning to trust that substance mattered more than appearance. That intention mattered more than expense, but the love Marcus and I shared would be enough to build a good life for our child. Even if it wasn't a perfect one by Elena's standards, the Christmas card stayed on our refrigerator for a few more weeks before I quietly moved it to a drawer. I replaced it with a photo Marcus had taken of me painting the nursery furniture, my pregnant belly prominent beneath a paint-splattered shirt. My hair a mess, but my expression focused and content that it wasn't a professional photograph, and I certainly wasn't wearing designer clothes, but it captured something Elena's perfect portrait couldn't. The joy of creating something with your own hands. The satisfaction of building a life based on your values rather than other people's expectations. Sometimes the most beautiful moments are the ones that happen between the camera shots, in the quiet spaces where real love lives and grows. I discovered Marcus's secret by accident on a Tuesday afternoon in February, 7 months into my pregnancy. He'd been working even longer hours lately, often staying at his computer until 2 or 3 in the morning, claiming he was close to a breakthrough with his prototype. I'd assumed he meant the game design he'd been developing for months, the fantasy adventure that consumed most of his creative energy. But that afternoon, while looking for our tax documents in his desk drawer, my fingers brushed against a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were business registration documents, incorporation papers, and what looked like a formal business plan bearing the name Nexus Interactive Systems and listing Marcus as founder and CEO. I stared at the papers, my pregnant brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just the hobby project I thought he was working on. This was a real company, officially registered, with what appeared to be actual investors and a serious business model. Marcus, I called, my voice probably sharper than I intended, emerged from the bathroom, toothbrush still in his mouth, and froze when he saw me sitting at his desk with the folder open in my lap. What is this? I asked, holding up the incorporation documents. He finished brushing his teeth before answering, buying time to formulate his response. When he returned, his expression was guilty but also excited, like a child caught planning a surprise party. I was going to tell you, he said, settling on the edge of our bed to face me. I've been waiting for the right moment. when everything was more concrete. Tell me what exactly? Sarah, it's working. The game, the company, it's all actually working. I have investors, real ones, who believe in what we're building. They've given me enough funding to quit school and work on this full time. I blinked at him, trying to reconcile this news with our recent conversations about budgeting for baby expenses and whether we could afford a better health insurance plan. Investors? Since when? Since October. Remember that conference I went to in Austin? The one I said was for networking? He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I recognized. I pitched the game there just as practice. I never expected anyone to take it seriously, but this venture capital firm approached me afterward, said they saw potential in the concept, and you didn't tell me? I wanted to, but everything was so uncertain at first. They wanted to see more development, proof of concept, user testing, data. I didn't want to get your hopes up if it fell through. I looked down at the business plan, pages of financial projections and market analysis written in Marcus's careful handwriting. How much money are we talking about? The initial investment was $50,000 for development costs. But Sarah, if the beta testing goes well, if we can prove market demand, they're talking about a Series A round that could be worth millions. Millions. The word hung in the air between us like something from a foreign language. I'd been budgeting in increments of $20, calculating whether we could afford name brand diapers, and Marcus was talking about millions. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again, though I was beginning to understand his reasoning. Because I know you. I know how you think about money and security and providing for our family. I didn't want you to stress about it if it didn't work out, and I didn't want you to count on it before it was real. He was right about knowing me. I would have worried constantly, would have built elaborate fantasies around the money that might never materialize, would have driven myself crazy with contingency planning. Show me everything, I said. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked me through his secret world of business development, investor meetings, and product testing. The game itself was more sophisticated than I'd realized, not just entertainment, but an educational tool that could help children develop problem-solving skills while having fun. The market research showed huge potential in both the gaming and educational technology sectors. The beta version launches next month, he explained, showing me screenshots of the polished interface. We've got partnerships lined up with 3 school districts for pilot programs, and preliminary feedback from focus groups has been incredible. I studied the user interface, recognizing elements of my own design aesthetic in the visual components. You used my character designs, with your permission, I hope. I credited you as lead visual designer in all the documentation. Lead visual designer. I looked at the business plan again, seeing my name listed officially as a key team member, with profit-sharing agreements and equity stakes I hadn't known existed. Marcus, I struggled to find words for the magnitude of what he'd been building in secret. This could actually work. It is working. The question is what we do next. What do you mean? He pulled out another folder, this one containing correspondence with larger tech companies, acquisition offers, and licensing deals. We have options. We could stay small, keep creative control, grow slowly. Or we could take a bigger investment, scale quickly, maybe even consider acquisition. Acquisition offers? Microsoft has expressed interest. So has a smaller gaming company that specializes in educational content. The offers aren't huge yet, but if the beta testing goes well, how much? Conservative estimates? Enough to buy a house, pay off your student loans, set up college funds for our kids. More optimistic projections? Enough to never worry about money again. I leaned back in his desk chair, one hand instinctively moving to my belly where our daughter was responding, to my elevated heart rate with increased movement. This changed everything, our financial worries, our future plans, our family's perception of our life choices. Does anyone else know? I asked. My roommates know I'm working on something bigger than a hobby project, but they don't know the details. I haven't told my parents or anyone in your family. I wanted to talk to you first about how we handle this. I understood his caution. If my family knew Marcus was potentially building a multi-million-dollar company, their entire attitude toward our marriage would shift overnight. We'd go from being the poor relations to being the family success story, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that level of attention and expectation. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to see how the beta testing goes before we make any major decisions. If it succeeds, we have some choices to make about growth strategy and how public we want to be about our success. And if it fails, then we're exactly where we are now, to people who love each other, about to have a baby, figuring out life as we go. That evening, as I lay in bed processing everything Marcus had revealed, I realized how much his secrecy had actually been a gift. He'd protected me from the stress of uncertainty while taking on the full weight of hope and fear himself. He'd been building our future quietly, without fanfare or pressure, letting me focus on growing our child while he grew our possibilities. The business registration documents went back into the drawer, but now I knew they were there, proof that Marcus wasn't just a dreamer, but a builder. Someone who could turn imagination into reality with patience and strategic thinking. As I fell asleep that night, our daughter moving gently in my belly, I allowed myself to imagine a different future than the one I'd been planning. Maybe we wouldn't struggle financially after all. Maybe our child would have advantages I'd never dreamed of providing. Maybe Marcus's quiet confidence in his abilities had been justified all along. But even more than the financial possibilities, I was struck by what this revelation said about the man I'd married. He'd been carrying this enormous secret, not to exclude me, but to protect me, working toward our shared dreams while allowing me to focus on my own crucial work of growing our family. That kind of partnership, that level of thoughtful consideration, was worth more than any amount of money his company might eventually generate. Though I had to admit, the money wouldn't hurt either. The contractions started during Elena's 4th of July barbecue, appropriately enough. We'd been invited, or rather, commanded to attend what Elena called her annual summer celebration, but what was really an opportunity for her to showcase her perfect house and perfect life to an audience of carefully selected guests. I was 8.5 months pregnant, moving slowly and uncomfortably in the July heat, while Elena flitted around her immaculate backyard in a white sundress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. The party was exactly what I'd expected. David's work colleagues, Elena's social circle, and a few family members there to witness the performance of domestic bliss. "Sarah, you look ready to pop," Elena announced loudly when we arrived, drawing attention to my ungainly state in front of her guests. "Are you sure you should be out and about so close to your due date?" "The doctor says walking is good for me," I replied, accepting the glass of ice water Marcus brought me and settling into one of the patio chairs that had been arranged for optimal conversation flow. "Well, just don't go into labor here," Elena laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I don't think my homeowner's insurance covers births in the pool house." The joke wasn't really a joke, and everyone knew it. I was the unpredictable element at Elena's carefully orchestrated event. The pregnant sister who might inconveniently remind everyone that life doesn't always follow party planning schedules. Mother spent most of the afternoon comparing my pregnancy to Elena's hypothetical future pregnancies, loud enough for the other guests to hear. "Elena's already researching birthing centers," she told David's boss's wife. "She wants to make sure she has the very best care when the time comes." Sarah, on the other hand, is using that clinic near the community college. The clinic near the community college was actually excellent, with midwives who knew my name and took time to answer my questions. But Mother made it sound like I was planning to give birth in a bus station. Different people have different priorities, I said diplomatically. Though what I really wanted to say was that my clinic had better patient satisfaction scores than the expensive hospital. Elena was considering. The first real contraction hit around 3 o'clock during Elena's elaborate presentation of the dessert course. I was sitting at the outdoor dining table, listening to David explain his latest promotion to anyone within earshot when pain wrapped around my middle like a belt being tightened too quickly. I breathed through it quietly, not wanting to interrupt Elena's moment or create drama at her party. Maybe it was just Braxton Hicks contractions, the false labor pains I'd been experiencing for weeks. Maybe the heat and the stress of being on display were just making me uncomfortable. The second contraction came 20 minutes later, stronger and more definitive. This wasn't false labor. I caught Marcus's attention with a look, and he immediately moved to sit beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. "How long?" he whispered. 20 minutes apart. Maybe we should head home soon. We made it through the rest of Elena's dessert presentation and the obligatory group photos on her perfect patio. But by 5 o'clock, the contractions were coming every 15 minutes and getting stronger. We needed to leave. "We should probably head out," Marcus announced during a lull in conversation. "Sarah's getting tired." "Oh, but we haven't done the house tour yet," Elena protested. "I wanted to show everyone the nursery I'm planning. I've got such wonderful ideas for when David and I start our family." "Maybe next time," I said, another contraction beginning as I spoke. I focused on my breathing, trying to appear calm while my uterus practiced for the main event. "Sarah, are you all right?" Mother asked, finally noticing my expression. "You look pale." "I'm fine, just tired." But Elena's attention was now fully focused on me, and I could see her calculating the potential disruption to her perfect party. "You're not in labor, are you? Because if you are, we should call an ambulance or something." "I'm not in labor," I lied smoothly. "Just some minor discomfort, nothing dramatic." The truth was, I didn't want my daughter's birth story to begin with Elena's barbecue. I didn't want the emergency drama, the rushed hospital trip from someone else's perfect house, the way it would become part of Elena's narrative rather than ours. I wanted to go home, labor quietly in the space Marcus and I had prepared, and make our way to the hospital on our own timeline. We managed to extract ourselves from the party with minimal fuss. Elena's relief obvious despite her protests that we were leaving too early. In the car, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what was happening. "This is it," I told Marcus as another contraction peaked. "She's coming today. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. But I want to go home first, get our things, maybe labor at home for a while before we go to the hospital." Marcus nodded, understanding, without explanation that I needed this transition to happen in our space. Surrounded by the things we'd chosen and prepared together, Elena's perfect party had been the backdrop for early labor, but it wouldn't define our daughter's arrival. At home, I changed into the comfortable dress I'd picked out weeks ago, while Marcus gathered our hospital bag and made sure his phone was fully charged. The contractions were getting stronger and closer together, but I felt calm and ready in a way I hadn't at the party. "Should we call your parents?" Marcus asked as he helped me through another contraction. "Not yet. Let's wait until we're at the hospital and everything is progressing normally. I don't want them rushing over and turning this into a circus." "What?" "About Elena." I considered this. Elena would expect to be informed, would want to be part of the drama and excitement, but she'd also bring her opinions and her need to manage everything, turning our quiet birth experience into something else entirely. After the baby's born, I decided. Once we've had some time alone with her, once everything is settled. We labored at home for 3 more hours, timing contractions and walking around our little apartment, pausing to breathe through each wave of intensity. It was exactly what I'd wanted, intimate, peaceful, focused entirely on the work my body was doing to bring our daughter into the world. When the contractions were consistently 5 minutes apart, we finally headed to the hospital. The admission forms asked for Marcus's occupation, and without thinking, I wrote student in the blank space. It was technically true. He was still enrolled in school, even though his focus had shifted entirely to his company. But it was also a deliberate choice to keep his business success private until we decided how and when to reveal it. "Why did you put student?" Marcus asked quietly as we waited in the admission area. "Because I'm not ready for everyone to know about the company yet. Because I want our daughter to be born to parents who love each other, not to a story about sudden wealth. Because some things should stay private until we're ready to share them." Marcus squeezed my hand, understanding completely. Our daughter would be born to the life we'd built together, not to expectations or assumptions about the life we might be able to afford in the future. Labor progressed quickly once we arrived at the hospital. By midnight, I was in active labor, focused entirely on the work of bringing our child safely into the world. The party at Elena's house felt like it had happened weeks ago rather than hours ago. This was what mattered: Marcus holding my hand, the midwife's calm guidance, and the overwhelming power of my body doing exactly what it was designed to do. Elena's perfect barbecue had been the unexpected beginning of our daughter's birth story, but it wouldn't define it. Our child was being born into love and authenticity, into a family that valued substance over appearance, dreams over security. And if Marcus's company succeeded the way he believed it would, she'd also be born into possibilities we were just beginning to imagine. Labor was nothing like the movies. There was no dramatic water breaking in a public place, no frantic rush to the hospital with Marcus panicking behind the wheel. Instead, it was hours of steady, purposeful work, my body and our daughter collaborating to bring her safely into the world while Marcus provided quiet, support, and encouragement. The birth certificate paperwork lay on the bedside table, waiting to be completed. Under father's occupation, the form remained blank while we focused on more immediate concerns. The question felt trivial compared to the magnitude of what was happening in that sterile room. The creation of our family, the transformation from couple to parents, the moment when theoretical love became tangible responsibility. By 3 a.m. I was deep in transition, the most intense phase of labor where every contraction demanded complete surrender to forces beyond my control. Marcus never left my side, offering ice chips when I could manage them, rubbing my back during contractions, and maintaining the calm presence I needed to trust my body's wisdom. "You're doing incredible work," the midwife said as she checked my progress. "Your daughter is almost ready to meet you." Your daughter. Those words cut through the pain and exhaustion, reminding me that this wasn't just an endurance test, but the final steps of a journey that would end with our child in our arms. "I can't do this," I whispered during a particularly intense contraction, doubt creeping in despite months of preparation. "You're doing this," Marcus said firmly, his voice close to my ear. "Right now, in this moment, you're bringing our daughter into the world. You're already doing it." He was right. Even as I spoke words of doubt, my body was continuing its work, each contraction bringing us closer to the moment we'd been anticipating for 9 months. When the urge to push finally came, it was unmistakable and overwhelming. Everything I'd read about labor, every birth story I'd heard, hadn't prepared me for the primal intensity of this phase. My body took over completely, working with a power and purpose that felt both completely natural and utterly miraculous. "I can see her head," the midwife announced. "Sarah, reach down and feel your daughter." With trembling fingers, I touched the crown of our baby's head, still inside me but almost here. The reality of it, that this was actually happening, that our child was about to be born, hit me with surprising force. "She's real," I whispered, as if I'd somehow doubted it until this moment. "She's been real all along," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "We're about to meet her." 3 more contractions, and suddenly she was here, slippery and perfect, and crying with impressive lung capacity. The midwife placed her immediately on my chest. This tiny person who'd been living inside me for 9 months, now separate and individual and absolutely beautiful. "Hello, baby girl," I whispered, studying her face through my tears. She had Marcus's dark hair and what looked like my stubborn chin, but mostly she looked like herself, completely unique and utterly perfect. Marcus was sobbing openly now, his hand gently touching our daughter's back as she settled against my chest. "She's so small," he marveled, "and so perfect." "Have you chosen a name?" the midwife asked as she performed the routine checks that confirmed our daughter was healthy and thriving. "Isabella," I said without hesitation. "Isabella Carmen Cardona." We debated names for months, but in that moment, holding her against my heart, there was no question. Isabella meant devoted to God, and Carmen was my grandmother's name, the one person in my family who had always believed in my worth, regardless of my achievements or failures. "Isabella Carmen Cardona," Marcus repeated, testing how the name sounded. "It's perfect. She's perfect." The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, measurements, and the quiet work of learning to be parents. Isabella latched immediately when I tried nursing, her tiny fingers gripping mine with surprising strength. Every sound she made, every movement, felt miraculous and significant. "She knows you," the midwife observed as Isabella settled contentedly in my arms. "Look how calm she is with her mama." I'd worried during pregnancy about whether I would know how to be a mother, whether the maternal instincts everyone talked about would actually materialize. But holding Isabella, responding to her cues, feeling the fierce protective love that had awakened in my chest, I realized that becoming a mother wasn't about knowing how to do everything perfectly. It was about being willing to learn, to adapt, to love without reservation. Marcus's phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the labor, but he'd ignored it completely, focused entirely on supporting me and welcoming our daughter. Now, in the quiet aftermath, he finally checked his messages. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing his expression change as he read. "It's work stuff," he said carefully. "The beta testing results came in overnight." "The numbers are," he paused, looking at Isabella sleeping in my arms, then at me. "They're incredible, Sarah. Better than our most optimistic projections." Even in my exhausted state, I understood what this meant. Marcus's company wasn't just succeeding. It was exceeding all expectations. While we'd been focused on bringing our daughter safely into the world, his business had been reaching milestones that would change our financial future forever. "The investors want to schedule a meeting for next week," he continued, his voice quiet with awe. "There's talk of acceleration, of moving up the timeline for everything." I looked down at Isabella, this tiny person who'd been born into circumstances far different from what anyone in my family imagined. She'd entered the world to parents they saw as struggling and unprepared, but who were actually on the verge of success beyond anything they could have predicted. "What do you want to do?" I asked Marcus. "Right now? Nothing. I want to hold my daughter and help my wife recover and figure out how to be a father. The business can wait." But we both knew it couldn't wait indefinitely. Soon we'd need to make decisions about Marcus's company, about how public to be with our success, about how to handle the inevitable shift in how our families viewed our life choices. "One thing at a time," I said, adjusting Isabella's position as she stirred in her sleep. "First we learn to be parents. Then we figure out the rest." Marcus nodded, pulling his chair closer to the hospital bed so he could watch Isabella sleep. "I love you," he said quietly, "both of you. I can't believe how lucky I am. We're lucky," I corrected, "all 3 of us." As I lay there in the recovery room, holding our daughter while Marcus dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because our lives were perfect or our future was guaranteed, but because we'd created something beautiful together, both our daughter and the partnership that had made her possible. Isabella Carmen Cardona had been born into love, creativity, and possibility. Whatever came next, she would grow up knowing that her parents had chosen each other deliberately, had built something meaningful together, and had brought her into the world with intention and joy. The birth certificate would be completed later, after we'd rested and processed the magnitude of becoming parents. But in that quiet morning hour, the only truth that mattered was the weight of our daughter in my arms and the certainty that our little family was exactly as it should be. Marcus's phone hadn't stopped buzzing since 6 in the morning. What started as occasional notifications had escalated to a constant stream of calls, texts, and email alerts that made concentrating on our new daughter nearly impossible. Isabella was sleeping peacefully in my arms, blissfully unaware that the outside world was trying to intrude on our perfect bubble of new parenthood. "Maybe you should turn it off," I suggested as another call came through. "I probably should," Marcus agreed, but made no move to silence the device. Something in his expression told me the calls weren't random. They meant something significant was happening. "Marcus, what's going on?" Before he could answer, his phone rang again. This time, instead of declining the call, he looked at the screen with an expression I'd never seen before, part shock, part excitement, part disbelief. "I need to take this," he said quietly. "It's my lawyer." He stepped into the hallway, leaving me alone with Isabella and a growing sense that our quiet family moment was about to be interrupted by something much larger than ourselves. Through the partially open door, I could hear fragments of Marcus's conversation. "When? And how much? And are you absolutely certain?" His voice carried an urgency that made my stomach tighten with anxiety. When he returned 5 minutes later, his face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. "Sarah," he said, sitting heavily in the bedside chair, "something's happened." "Something incredible. What kind of something?" The beta testing results weren't just good, they were extraordinary. The user engagement numbers, the educational impact data, the market response, everything exceeded every projection we'd made. He paused, running his hands through his hair in that nervous gesture I knew so well. "Microsoft didn't just express interest in our educational gaming platform. They made an acquisition offer." "What kind of offer?" Marcus looked at Isabella sleeping in my arms, then back at me. $50 million. The words hung in the air like something from a foreign language. $50 million. I couldn't even conceptualize that amount of money, couldn't relate it to anything in our actual experience. 50 million? I repeated stupidly. For full acquisition, including all intellectual property, development team integration, and a 5-year consulting contract for both of us. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might make the offer disappear. "Sarah, this isn't just money. This is generational wealth. This is never having to worry about anything ever again." Before I could fully process what he was telling me, his phone started ringing again. This time it was a reporter from TechCrunch, then Forbes, then the local business journal. Word of the acquisition offer was spreading through the tech industry like wildfire, and somehow the media had already picked up the story. "Mr. Cardona?" A nurse poked her head into our room. "There are some people downstairs asking about visiting. Ours. They say they're from Channel 7 News." News? I felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Every familiar thing becoming strange and surreal. Marcus was scrolling through his phone, his expression growing more overwhelmed by the minute. "There are articles already. Look at this headline. Local gaming startup receives massive Microsoft offer. And this one, community college student builds education empire." He showed me the screen, and there was a photo of him from last year's tech conference. looking young and earnest under a headline that called him the next great innovator in educational technology. The article described our humble beginnings and Marcus's meteoric rise from struggling student to Silicon Valley sensation. "This is insane," I said, adjusting Isabella as she stirred in response to my elevated heart rate. "How did this happen so fast?" "I don't know." The lawyer said Microsoft wanted to move quickly before other companies could make competing offers. They announced the acquisition offer in their morning press release, probably to lock in their claim on us before anyone else could interfere. Another knock at the door interrupted us. This time it was a different nurse, looking harried and slightly starstruck. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but there are reporters in the lobby, and your family is downstairs asking about visiting hours. Also, someone from the mayor's office called. They want to schedule a meeting about economic development in the county." The mayor's office, reporters, our family, who had dismissed Marcus as a dreamer with no prospects, suddenly interested in visiting hours. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "we need to make some decisions. The acquisition offer has a response deadline of 48 hours. Microsoft wants an answer before other companies can enter bidding wars. 48 hours? I just gave birth 12 hours ago. I know. I know it's overwhelming, but this is what we've been working toward, what I've been building for months. This is our chance to secure Isabella's future, to give her every opportunity we could ever dream of." I looked down at our daughter, still sleeping peacefully despite the chaos erupting around us. This morning, she'd been born to parents her extended family saw as financially unstable dreamers. By afternoon, she might be the daughter of multimillionaires with a business empire and media attention. "What do you want to do?" I asked Marcus. "I want to provide for my family," he said immediately. "I want to give Isabella every advantage, every opportunity. I want to prove to everyone who doubted us that we were building something real, even my family." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Especially your family. They've spent years making you feel small, making you think you weren't good enough, that our love wasn't enough. This changes everything, Sarah. This proves they were wrong about us." Another buzz from his phone, this time a text message. Marcus read it and his expression shifted to something between amusement and disbelief. "What now?" "It's from Elena. She's downstairs with your parents. She says congratulations and asks if we need anything." He showed me the message, which was much longer and more effusive than anything Elena had ever sent me before. She wants to know if we've considered legal representation for the acquisition, and she mentions that David has experience with major financial transactions. Of course. Elena, who had spent years dismissing Marcus as an unsuitable husband for her unsuccessful sister, was suddenly interested in being helpful. My family, who had treated our pregnancy announcement like a financial disaster, was now rushing to the hospital to offer their support and expertise. "It's starting already," I said. "What's starting?" "The way everyone's going to treat us differently. Now, the way this money changes everything, not just for us, but for how everyone sees us." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Isabella sleep. "Does that bother you?" "I don't know yet. Maybe. It just feels strange that the same people who couldn't see our worth when we were struggling are suddenly eager to be part of our success." "We don't have to let them be part of it," Marcus said gently. "This is our choice, our family, our future. We decide who gets access to our life and on what terms." I considered this as Isabella woke up and began making the small sounds that meant she was hungry. The simple act of nursing her felt like an anchor to what really mattered, the three of us, together, regardless of bank balances or business, deals or media attention. "Let's take the deal," I said finally. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Not because I want to prove anything to my family, but because I want to give Isabella choices. I want her to grow up knowing that her parents loved each other enough to take risks, and that sometimes those risks pay off in ways you never expected. Marcus leaned over and kissed my forehead, then Isabella's. I love you, both of you. We're going to figure this out together. Together, I agreed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that our quiet life was about to become much more complicated than either of us had anticipated. Outside our hospital room door, I could hear voices in the hallway, reporters, family members, hospital staff trying to manage the sudden chaos. But inside our room, it was still just the three of us, Marcus, Isabella, and me, figuring out how to be a family while the world tried to decide what our story meant, whatever came next. I was determined that our daughter's story would be about love first, success second, and the strength that comes from building something real together. The get well cards arrived before my family did. Within hours of the Microsoft acquisition news breaking, my hospital room began filling with elaborate flower arrangements and expensive cards from people who had barely acknowledged my existence before. The cards were thick, embossed cardstock from high-end stationery stores, the kind that cost more than my family usually spent on birthday gifts. From the Riverside Country Club Board of Directors, I read aloud, opening a cream-colored envelope with gold edges. Congratulations on your new arrival and your family's remarkable success. I'd never set foot in the Riverside Country Club. Elena was the one with the membership, the one who played tennis there and attended their charity luncheons. But apparently my sudden elevation to wife of tech mogul had earned me their attention. Marcus sat beside my hospital bed, fielding phone calls from reporters and investors, while trying to help me process the surreal transformation of our circumstances. Isabella slept peacefully in my arms, oblivious to the fact that she'd been born into a media sensation. Mrs. Cardona, a nurse, appeared in the doorway with yet another delivery. These just arrived for you. The latest offering was an enormous arrangement of white roses and baby's breath from Elena and David, with a card that read, "Welcome to the world, little Isabella. We can't wait to spoil our precious niece. All our love, Aunt Elena and Uncle David." Aunt Elena, Uncle David. Elena had never expressed any interest in being an aunt before, had never asked about my pregnancy or offered to help with baby preparations. But now she was claiming her role in Isabella's life with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for networking opportunities. "Your parents are here," the nurse mentioned as she arranged the flowers on the windowsill. "They've been in the lobby for an hour, but they wanted to make sure you were ready for visitors." An hour in the lobby. My parents, who had arrived at their own daughter's wedding ceremony late due to the traffic, had been waiting patiently for permission to visit their new granddaughter. The shift in their behavior was as dramatic as it was transparent. "Send them up," I said, though I dreaded the conversation that was about to unfold. Mother entered first, carrying a gift bag from an expensive baby boutique and wearing the kind of outfit she usually saved for church or important social events. Father followed, looking uncomfortable but trying to project the dignity appropriate for a newly minted grandfather of a tech heir. "Mia," Mother exclaimed, rushing to my bedside with theatrical emotion. "How are you feeling? How is our precious granddaughter? 24 hours ago, Isabella had been an inconvenient pregnancy that would strain our already limited resources. Now she was precious, a beloved addition to the family legacy." "We're both doing well," I said carefully, studying their faces for genuine emotion beneath the performance. "She's beautiful," Father said, peering at Isabella with what appeared to be authentic wonder. "She looks like you did as a baby, Sarah." "Like Elena," Mother corrected automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, like both of you. She has the family features." I watched them take turns holding Isabella, marveling at her tiny fingers and perfect features, speaking in the hushed tones appropriate for being royalty. Their delight seemed genuine, but it was impossible to separate their joy in having a new granddaughter from their excitement about her parents' sudden wealth. We brought something for the baby, Mother said, producing the gift bag with obvious pride. Inside was a hand-embroidered baby blanket that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget, along with several outfits from boutiques I'd never shopped in. "This is very expensive," I said, examining the blanket's intricate stitching. "Nothing's too good for our granddaughter," Father said firmly. "We want Isabella to have the best of everything." The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, my parents had expressed concern about our ability to provide for a child, questioning whether we could afford diapers and doctor visits. Now they were buying luxury baby items as if money had never been an issue. "We also wanted to talk to you about Isabella's future," Mother continued, settling into the visitor's chair with the air of someone preparing for an important business discussion. "Her education, her opportunities, we want to make sure she has every advantage." "What kind of advantages?" Marcus asked, though I could tell from his tone that he already suspected where this conversation was headed. "Well, private school, of course," Father said. "The best prep schools, maybe even boarding school when she's older." Elena's been researching educational consultants who specialize in placing children in elite institutions. Elena had been researching educational consultants for our one-day-old daughter before anyone had asked what Marcus and I wanted for our child's education. "That's very thoughtful," I said diplomatically, "but Isabella just got here." "We haven't made any decisions about her schooling." "Of course not," Mother agreed quickly, "but it's never too early to start planning." "Elena says the best schools have waiting lists that are years long. She's offered to make some calls, use her connections to get Isabella's name on the right lists." "Elena's connections?" "Elena's expertise." Elena, who 12 hours ago had been concerned about whether we could afford to raise a child properly, was now positioning herself as the family authority on elite educational planning. "Where's Elena, by the way?" I asked. "She's in meetings with David about financial planning services," Father said with obvious pride. "They want to help you and Marcus manage your new wealth responsibly. David has experience with high net worth clients." High net worth clients. I'd gone from being a financial liability to a high net worth client overnight, and suddenly David's banking expertise was relevant to our lives. "We haven't decided what to do about the acquisition offer yet," Marcus said carefully. "Oh, but you'll take it, won't you?" Mother's voice carried a note of anxiety, as if our financial success was somehow contingent on making the right choice. $50 million, that's life-changing money. "It's our decision to make," I said firmly. "Marcus and I will discuss it and choose what's best for our family." Of course," Father said quickly. "We just want to support you however we can. Your mother and I have been talking about ways we might help babysitting when you travel for business, helping with household management as your circumstances change." Household management. They were already imagining a lifestyle that required household staff and business travel, projecting a future none of us had actually planned. Isabella chose that moment to wake up and begin fussing, requiring my attention and providing a natural break in the increasingly surreal conversation. As I adjusted her position and checked if she needed feeding, I noticed how carefully my parents were watching me, not just with grandparental affection, but with the focused attention of people studying something valuable. "We should probably let you rest," Mother said, though she made no immediate move to leave. "But we wanted to make sure you knew how proud we are of you both." Proud. That was a new sentiment from parents who had spent years expressing disappointment in my choices and concern about my future. "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? Their pride felt conditional and recent, but Isabella was their granddaughter regardless of our financial circumstances, and I wanted her to have relationships with her extended family if possible. After they left, promising to return the next day with Elena and more gifts, Marcus and I sat in the relative quiet of our hospital room, processing what had just happened. That was intense, Marcus said finally. They mean well, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. They're just excited about Isabella and probably overwhelmed by everything that's happening. Are you okay with this? With how they're suddenly so involved? I considered the question while watching Isabella sleep. My parents' newfound enthusiasm for our family felt hollow and opportunistic, but it also offered something I'd wanted my entire life, their approval and support. Even if that approval was motivated by money rather than love, it might still benefit Isabella in practical ways. I think we need to be careful, I said finally, grateful for their support, but clear about our boundaries. This is our family, our money, our decisions. Agreed. But Sarah, Marcus hesitated, then continued. Are you prepared for how complicated this is going to get? Everyone wanting pieces of our success, everyone having opinions about our choices. I looked around our hospital room, filled with expensive flowers from people who had never sent me so much as a birthday card before. The transformation was dizzying and slightly nauseating, but it was also an opportunity to redefine relationships. On our terms, we'll figure it out, I said. One conversation at a time, one boundary at a time. The important thing is that we stay focused on what matters, our family, our values, our genuine relationships. Marcus nodded, reaching out to stroke Isabella's cheek with one gentle finger. She's going to grow up with advantages we never had, but also with challenges we never faced. Then we'll help her navigate both, I said. Together, the expensive get-well cards kept arriving throughout the day, each one marking another relationship that would need to be carefully managed in our new reality. But at the center of it all was our daughter, sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely unaware that her birth had triggered a fundamental shift in how the world saw her parents. Whatever came next, I was determined that Isabella would know the difference between people who loved her for herself and people who valued her for what she represented. It was a lesson I was still learning myself, but one that had become infinitely more important now that I had a daughter to protect. We left the hospital 3 days later through a service exit, avoiding the reporters who had taken up semi-permanent residence in the main lobby. Marcus carried Isabella in her car seat while I walked slowly beside them, still recovering from delivery but eager to escape the circus our lives had become. The apartment keys felt strange in my hand as we climbed the stairs to our little studio above the hardware store. These same keys had unlocked our humble beginning just days ago, but now they felt like artifacts from a previous life, evidence of who we'd been before the world decided we were worth paying attention to. It looks so small, I said as Marcus unlocked our door. It is small, he agreed, but there was affection in his voice. But it's ours. And it's where we brought Isabella home. The apartment was exactly as we left it in our rush to the hospital, Marcus's computer still displaying lines of code, my art supplies scattered across the kitchen table, the makeshift nursery corner waiting patiently for its occupant. Nothing had changed, but everything felt different viewed through the lens of our new circumstances. Isabella settled immediately into her crib, as if she belonged in this modest space regardless of what the future might hold. Watching her sleep, surrounded by furniture we'd painted ourselves and decorations I'd sewn by hand, I felt a fierce protectiveness for this simple beginning. We need to talk about what comes next, Marcus said as we sat on our secondhand couch, both of us exhausted but too wired to sleep. I know. The acquisition offer expires tomorrow. It's not just about the money anymore, Marcus said carefully. It's about what kind of life we want to build for Isabella and how public we want to be about our success. He was right. The Microsoft offer had already changed everything, whether we accepted it or not. Our names were in the tech news. Our story was being told by reporters who'd never met us. And our families were making assumptions about our future that we hadn't agreed to. What does your gut tell you? I asked that. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Isabella sleep. My gut says we should take the deal, but on our terms. Move somewhere we can have privacy, set boundaries about media access, be strategic about how we manage the transition. Move. This apartment was perfect for us as a struggling couple, but it's not going to work if we're trying to raise a family while managing a tech company and media attention. We need space, privacy, security. I looked around our little studio, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. The thin walls that let us hear our neighbors' conversations. The single parking spot that barely fit Marcus's old Honda. The lack of a proper office space for running a business. None of it would work if our lives became as complicated as they seemed destined to become. Where would we go? Somewhere close enough that we can stay connected to our real friends and Mrs. Rodriguez, but far enough away that we can control who has access to our lives. Marcus pulled out his laptop and showed me real estate listings he'd apparently been researching. Look at this place. It's about 20 minutes from here, but it has a proper office space, a real nursery, and enough land that reporters can't camp outside our front door. The house on the screen was beautiful, a modern design, with large windows and clean lines, surrounded by trees that would provide privacy without feeling isolated. It was also clearly expensive, the kind of property that required the kind of money Marcus's company would generate. It feels presumptuous, I said, like we're counting chickens before they hatch. The chickens are already hatched, Sarah. The acquisition offer is real. The media attention is real. The fact that our families are still interested in our lives is real. We can either plan for our new reality or let it happen to us. He was right, but something in me resisted the idea of leaving our first home so quickly. This apartment represented our authentic beginning, the place where we'd learned to be married, where I'd grown our baby, where Marcus had built his company from nothing. Can I think about it? Of course. But we should probably decide tonight. The real estate market moves fast when you're looking at properties in this price range. This price range. A phrase that had never applied to our lives before, but now seemed to be our new reality. That evening, while Isabella slept and Marcus worked on his laptop fielding congratulations, emails, and planning his response to Microsoft, I walked around our small apartment, memorizing details I'd never paid attention to before. The way afternoon light slanted through our one-vid window. The sound of Mr. Peterson's radio playing classical music in the apartment below us. The familiar creak of the floorboard near the kitchen that I'd learned to avoid when Isabella was sleeping. This place had been enough when we had nothing but dreams and determination. It had sheltered our love, witnessed our struggles, and provided the foundation for everything we'd built together. Leaving it felt like abandoning the people we'd been in favor of the people money might make us become. But Marcus was right about needing privacy and space. Already, I'd noticed a car parked across the street with someone inside who seemed to be watching our building. Already, our neighbors were asking pointed questions about the news reports they'd seen. Our quiet life was becoming public property, whether we wanted it to or not. Okay, I said finally, settling beside Marcus on the couch. Let's look at the house again. We spent the next hour researching the property, the neighborhood, the schools that Isabella would eventually attend. The house came with a home office that could accommodate Marcus's business needs, a nursery that was larger than our entire current living space, and enough distance from main roads that we could control who approached our front door. We could still keep this place, Marcus suggested, as an office or just because it's special to us. We don't have to choose between our past and our future. The idea of maintaining our apartment as a connection to our authentic beginning felt like the perfect compromise. We could move forward without abandoning the foundation that had made our success possible. Let's do it, I said. Take the Microsoft deal, buy the house, start planning for the life we want Isabella to have. Marcus called his lawyer that night, accepting the acquisition offer with carefully negotiated terms that would allow us to maintain creative control over future projects while benefiting from Microsoft's resources and distribution network. By morning, we would officially be wealthy beyond anything either of us had ever imagined. But that night, our last night in the apartment where our real life had begun, we lay in our bed next to Isabella's crib and talked about how to stay true to ourselves amid circumstances that would inevitably change us. "Promise me something," I said as we drifted toward sleep. "Anything. Promise me we'll remember this feeling, how much we love each other when we have nothing but each other. Promise me money won't change the core of who we are together." "I promise," Marcus said, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "We'll remember. And if we ever forget, we'll come back here and remind ourselves." Outside our window, the familiar sounds of our working-class neighborhood continued. Late shift workers heading home, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional siren. Soon we'd wake up to different sounds in a different place, but the love that had grown in this small space would move with us, sustaining us through whatever complications wealth might bring. Our last night as regular people, and our first night as a family that would need to learn how to navigate success without losing sight of what had made that success possible in the first place. The bank statements arrived by accident, delivered to our new address, but clearly intended for Elena and David. The envelope had been torn open, whether by the postal service or by an eager recipient who realized too late it wasn't meant for them, and hastily resealed with clear tape. I should have returned it immediately without looking, but something about Elena's increasingly frequent visits to our new house, combined with David's sudden interest in consulting on our financial planning, made me curious about their actual circumstances. What I found inside the envelope explained everything. David's investment portfolio had lost nearly 60% of its value in the past 6 months. His conservative strategy had apparently involved heavily leveraged positions in cryptocurrency and tech stocks that had collapsed spectacularly just weeks before Marcus's company hit the headlines. The savings account that should have contained their house down payment showed a balance of $1,247.83. The credit card statements revealed debt approaching 6 figures, much of it from the lifestyle Elena had been maintaining while their actual income plummeted. Elena and David weren't just interested in our sudden wealth, they were desperate for it. I was still processing this information when Elena arrived for her daily visit, carrying another expensive gift for Isabella and wearing the kind of designer outfit that now made sense only if she was buying everything on credit. "Sarah, darling," she called out as she led herself into our house using the spare key we'd given her for emergencies. "How's our precious little angel today? Our precious little angel." Elena had seamlessly inserted herself into Isabella's life, arriving each morning with gifts, advice, and increasingly specific suggestions about how we should be managing our newfound wealth. "She's napping," I said, not mentioning that Elena's enthusiastic arrivals had begun disrupting Isabella's sleep schedule. "Perfect. That gives us time to talk." Elena settled into our living room with the proprietary air of someone who felt entitled to both access and influence. "David and I have been working on some investment strategies for you. We think there are some incredible opportunities right now, especially in the sectors David specializes in." That's thoughtful, but Marcus and I haven't decided how we want to handle investments yet. "Oh, but you shouldn't wait too long," Elena said, her voice taking on the urgent tone she usually reserved for social emergencies. "Markets move so quickly, and David says there are some time-sensitive opportunities that could really maximize your returns." Time-sensitive opportunities. David's specialty, according to the bank statements currently hidden in my kitchen drawer, was apparently losing other people's money quickly and efficiently. What kind of opportunities? I asked, curious to see how far Elena would push this. "Well, there's this cryptocurrency fund that David's been tracking. It's very exclusive. Minimum investment of $5 million, but the potential returns are extraordinary." And there's a commercial real estate deal in the downtown district that needs investors by the end of the week. $5 million minimums. End of week deadlines. Everything Elena was describing sounded exactly like the kind of opportunities that had apparently destroyed David's own portfolio. That's a lot to consider, I said carefully. I know it seems overwhelming, but that's why you need experienced guidance. David has been managing high net worth portfolios for years. Elena's voice was getting higher, more pressured. He knows how to protect wealth, how to make it grow responsibly. Protect wealth. Grow responsibly. The irony was so thick I could barely maintain my neutral expression. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you and David doing okay? Financially, I mean. You've seemed stressed lately. For just a moment, Elena's perfect composure cracked. I saw something desperate and frightened flash across her features before she reassembled her social mask. We're fine, she said quickly. David's business is doing incredibly well. Why would you ask that? No reason. You've just been so focused on our financial planning, I wondered if there was something going on. I'm focused on your financial planning because I care about you, Elena said, but her voice had an edge now. Because I've seen what happens to people who come into money suddenly and don't manage it properly. They make terrible decisions, lose everything, end up worse off than they started. Have you seen that happen? David has clients, former clients, who made exactly those mistakes. People who thought they were smarter than the market, who didn't trust professional advice, who ended up losing fortunes because they were too proud to accept help. Former clients. People who had trusted David's advice and lost their money, just like David had apparently lost his own. Isabella chose that moment to wake up crying, giving me an excuse to step away from the conversation and process what I'd learned. As I picked up my daughter and settled into the nursing chair Marcus had assembled in our proper nursery, I tried to figure out how to handle this new information. Elena and David weren't just interested in our success. They were counting on it to save them from their own financial mistakes. Elena's sudden sisterly affection, David's eager offers of professional guidance, their daily visits and expensive gifts, all of it was motivated by desperation rather than love. When I returned to the living room, Elena was on her phone with David, speaking in the low, urgent tones of people discussing crisis management. Told you she'd be suspicious if we pushed too hard, she was saying, but we can't wait much longer. The margin calls are, she noticed me listening and quickly ended the call. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. David just wanted to know if you'd had a chance to review those investment opportunities. Actually, Elena, I think Marcus and I need some time to settle into our new circumstances before we make any major financial decisions. We're still adjusting to everything that's happened. Elena's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: disappointment, frustration, fear, and finally resignation. Of course, she said, but her voice was flat, now deflated. You should take your time. Make sure you're making the right choices. After she left, I sat in our beautiful new living room holding my daughter and thinking about the complexity of family relationships when money is involved. Elena's desperation was real, her fear was genuine, but so was her willingness to manipulate our relationship to solve her problems. When Marcus came home that evening, I showed him the bank statements and explained what I'd discovered about Elena and David's situation. That explains a lot, he said, reading through the credit card bills. David's been pushing those investment opportunities pretty aggressively. What do we do? They're family, but they're also trying to use us to fix problems they created. Marcus was quiet for a long time, holding Isabella while she dozed against his chest. We help them, he said finally, but on our terms, in our way, not by throwing money at David's failed investment strategies. What do you mean? I mean, we pay off their debt directly, help them get back on their feet. but we don't give them access to our investment decisions or ongoing finances. We help them once, cleanly, and then we maintain clear boundaries. It was a generous solution, more generous than Alana's manipulative behavior deserved, but it was also practical. Helping them stabilize their finances would remove the desperate pressure that was driving their increasingly uncomfortable behavior. Are you sure that's a lot of money? It's not that much money, not anymore. And family is family, even when they're complicated. Marcus adjusted Isabella's position as she stirred in her sleep. But after we help them, we need to be very clear about boundaries. Our financial decisions are ours to make. That night, I called Elena and asked her to come over the next day for a family meeting. I didn't explain why, but something in my tone must have conveyed seriousness because she agreed immediately. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their poor choices while still offering genuine help. Sometimes, setting boundaries is actually an act of generosity, protecting both yourself and the people you love from the corrosive effects of financial desperation. Elena would get her help, but she wouldn't get access to our ongoing wealth. David would get his second chance, but he wouldn't get to risk our money on his next set of opportunities. It wasn't the partnership Elena had envisioned, but it was the kind of family support that might actually help them build something sustainable rather than just postponing their next crisis. The voice recording on my phone captured everything. I hadn't intended to record anything. I'd been using my phone to time Isabella's feeding schedule when my family arrived for what they thought was a casual Sunday dinner. But when I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and forgot about it, the voice memo app continued running, capturing everything they said while I was upstairs changing Isabella's diaper. What I heard when I played it back later made my blood run cold. I still can't believe she landed someone like Marcus. Elena's voice came through clearly. I mean, look at her. She's gained so much weight since the baby, and she never was particularly attractive to begin with. Elena, mother's voice carried mild reproach, but not much. What? I'm just saying it's lucky Marcus turned out to be successful because it's not like Sarah had other options. Who else would have married her? She's our daughter, father said, but his tone suggested obligation rather than affection. And we love her, mother added quickly, but Elena has a point. Sarah was never the pretty one, never the smart one. She's fortunate that Marcus sees something in her the rest of us missed. Do you think she knows? Elena continued. About David's situation, I mean. She's been so resistant to our investment advice. She's always been suspicious, mother said. Even as a child, she questioned everything instead of just accepting guidance from people who know better. Well, she needs to get over it. Elena's voice turned sharp. David says we can't wait much longer. The margin calls are coming due, and if Sarah doesn't let us help manage their money, father interrupted. She's coming back. The recording captured my footsteps on the stairs, a sound of my voice asking if anyone wanted more coffee, and then 30 minutes of normal family conversation. But by then, I'd heard enough to understand exactly what my family really thought of me and exactly why they'd suddenly become so interested in my life. I waited until after dinner, after they'd all left with promises to call soon and offers to babysit whenever we needed them, before I told Marcus what I'd discovered. Play it again, he said, his jaw tightening as he listened to Elena's casual cruelty. I can't, I said, deleting the recording immediately. I can't listen to it again, but I didn't need to hear it again. Every word was burned into my memory, the dismissive assessment of my appearance, the surprise that anyone would want to marry me, the calculation behind their sudden affection. Sarah, Marcus said gently, you know none of that is true, right? Is it? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. I mean, look at me, Marcus. I'm not Elena. I'm not the pretty one. Or the successful one. Maybe they're right that you could have done better. Marcus took my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. Listen to me. You are beautiful. You are brilliant. You are creative and kind and stronger than any of them will ever be. The fact that they can't see that says everything about them and nothing about you. But no buts. Sarah, I didn't fall in love with you because I had limited options. I fell in love with you because you're extraordinary. Because you see possibilities where other people see problems. Because you make art that moves people. And you love with your whole heart. And you never gave up on your dreams, even when everyone around you said they were impossible. I wanted to believe him. But Elena's words had found every insecurity I'd spent years trying to overcome, every doubt I'd worked to silence. They think I'm lucky to have you, I said. They're right, Marcus said firmly. You are lucky to have me, and I'm lucky to have you. That's how good marriages work. Both people feel grateful for what they found together. He was right, but the poison of my family's real opinions was already working through my system, making me question everything I thought I knew about my worth, my marriage, my place in the world. We need to talk to them, Marcus said. This can't continue. What's the point? You heard what they really think. The point is that they don't get to treat you like this anymore. The point is that our daughter doesn't grow up watching her mother be diminished by people who should love her unconditionally. That stopped me cold. Isabella, who is currently sleeping peacefully in her crib, would eventually be old enough to witness these family dynamics. She'd hear the subtle put-downs, the comparisons, the implication that some people were worth more than others based on conventional measures of success and beauty. You're right, I said. She can't grow up thinking this is normal. We planned the confrontation carefully, not an emotional outburst, but a calm, clear statement of boundaries that would either change the dynamic or end it entirely. The next Sunday, when my family arrived for their usual visit, Marcus and I were ready. We need to talk, I said after the initial greetings, before anyone could settle in for the performance of family harmony. About what, Mia? Mother asked, though something in my tone had already put her on alert. About honesty. About respect. About what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. Elena exchanged glances with David, probably wondering if this was about their financial situation. I know what you really think of me, I continued. I know you think I'm unattractive, unmarriageable, lucky to have found someone willing to settle. For me, the silence that followed was deafening. No one attempted to deny it, which was somehow more painful than the original words had been. Sarah, Father said finally, we never meant. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant every word. And I need you to know that I heard you. I understand exactly what our relationship has been based on. And I'm not willing to continue it on those terms. You're being overly sensitive, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I, Elena, you've spent my entire life making sure I knew I was less than you? Less attractive, less successful, less worthy of love and respect. You've used my insecurities as weapons, and you've recruited our parents to help you do it. That's not a no, I continued, my voice getting stronger. Now that I have something you need, suddenly I'm worthy of your attention. Suddenly you want to be involved in my life, offer advice, help manage my success. But the foundation hasn't changed. You still see me as fundamentally less than you, just temporarily useful. Mother started to speak, but Marcus stepped forward. Sarah is the most remarkable person I've ever met, he said quietly. She's brilliant and creative and more beautiful than any of you have the capacity to recognize. The fact that you've spent years trying to convince her otherwise says everything about your character and nothing about hers. We love Sarah, Father said weakly. No, I said. You love the idea of having access to our money. You love being connected to our success. But you don't love me, not the real me, not unconditionally, not the way family should. Sarah, please, Mother said, tears starting to form. You're our daughter. Of course we love you. Then prove it, I said. Prove it by apologizing for the years of making me feel small. Prove it by acknowledging that I have worth independent of my husband's success. Prove it by treating me with the respect you've always given Elena automatically. The room was silent, except for Isabella stirring in her baby carrier, responding to the tension even in her sleep. We can't change the past, Elena said finally. No, but you can change how you treat me going forward. You can choose to see me as I actually am instead of as the disappointing daughter who somehow got lucky. And if we can't, Elena's voice carried a challenge, as if she was testing whether our newfound wealth had given me the courage to stand up to her permanently. Then you don't get to be part of our lives, Marcus said simply. We won't expose Isabella to people who don't respect her mother. We won't pretend these relationships are healthy just because you're family. The ultimatum hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. My family could choose to evolve, to acknowledge their behavior and work to change it, or they could choose to maintain their patterns and lose access to the daughter and granddaughter they'd suddenly decided were valuable. We need time to think, Father said finally. Take all the time you need, I said, but understand that our boundaries aren't negotiable. If you want to be part of our lives, it has to be because you genuinely value us, not because you want something from us. They left that day without the usual promises to call soon or offers to help with the baby. The house felt both emptier and cleaner after they'd gone, as if clearing the air had literally improved the atmosphere. That night, as Marcus and I sat in our living room with Isabella sleeping between us, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The peace that comes from finally standing up for yourself, regardless of the consequences. Are you okay? Marcus asked. I think so, I said, and realized it was true. I think I might be better than okay. For the first time in my life, I'd set boundaries with my family based on my own worth rather than their approval. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. But it was also necessary. Isabella would grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions, that respect isn't earned through achievements, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your humanity. Whether my family chose to rise to those standards or remove themselves from our lives entirely was their decision to make. The legal documents arrived 3 weeks after our confrontation, hand-delivered by a courier who required my signature for receipt. The thick envelope contained a restraining order and cease and desist letter that I'd never expected to need, but which had become necessary after Elena's behavior escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. It started with a social media campaign. Elena began posting on Instagram and Facebook about our family crisis, portraying herself as the concerned sister trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. According to her carefully crafted narrative, Marcus was isolating me from my loving family, controlling our finances, and preventing normal grandparent relationships with Isabella. Praying for my sister Sarah, read one post, accompanied by a photo of Elena looking appropriately worried. Sometimes sudden wealth changes people in ways their families struggle to understand. We just want what's best for her and our precious niece. The posts garnered dozens of sympathetic comments from Elena's social circle, creating a public narrative that cast my family as victims of my newfound arrogance rather than addressing the actual dynamic that had led to our estrangement. Then came the showing. Up unannounced, Elena began arriving at our house at random times, claiming she was concerned about my well-being and needed to check on Isabella. When I refused to let her in, she'd sit in her car outside our house, taking photos and posting them online with captions about being heartbroken by family division. The final straw was when she contacted a local news station offering to do an interview about how sudden wealth had torn apart a loving family. The reporter who called me was clearly expecting a story about family greed and isolation, not about years of emotional manipulation and conditional love. I understand there's been some family tension since your husband's business success, the reporter said when she called. Your sister Elena is concerned that you're being isolated from people who care about you. My sister Elena is concerned about losing access to our money, I replied calmly. She's not concerned about my well-being. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence that financial motives are behind her concerns? I thought about David's failed investments, about Elena's desperate attempts to involve us in their financial planning, about the bank statements that had revealed their true situation. But putting that information on the record would only escalate the public drama. I have evidence that my family's sudden interest in our lives coincided exactly with news of our financial success. I said carefully. Before that, they showed little interest in my marriage, my pregnancy, or my child. Elena Morrison says you've changed since acquiring wealth, that you've become suspicious and isolated. Elena Morrison, I interrupted, spent the first 28 years of my life making sure I knew I was the unattractive, unsuccessful sister who was lucky anyone would marry me. Her current concern for my well-being is remarkably recent. The reporter pressed for more details, but I ended the call without providing the kind of dramatic quotes that would make Elena's preferred story more compelling. That evening, Marcus and I made the decision to involve our lawyer. This can't continue, Marcus said as we reviewed Elena's latest social media posts. She's creating a public narrative that could affect our business relationships, our privacy, and Isabella's future. She's also trespassing when she shows up here uninvited. Our lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chun, who specialized in privacy protection for high net worth individuals, reviewed Elena's social media activity and advised us that we had grounds for both a restraining order and cease and desist demands. Your sister-in-law is engaging in harassment and defamation, Patricia explained. She's using your daughter's image without permission, making false statements about your mental state and your marriage, and engaging in stalking behavior by repeatedly coming to your property uninvited. Will this make things worse? I asked. More public, more dramatic? It will make things different, Patricia said, but it will also make them clear. Right now, your family is operating under the assumption that they can pressure you into compliance through public embarrassment and emotional manipulation. Legal boundaries will clarify that those tactics won't work. The restraining order prohibited Elena from coming within 500 feet of our property, contacting us directly through any means, or posting about us or Isabella on social media. The cease and desist letter demanded the removal of all existing posts that referenced our family and warned of legal action if the harassment continued. Elena's response was swift and predictable. A tearful video posted to her Instagram story about how wealth had corrupted me and turned me against the family who only wanted to love and support me. I never thought my own sister would use lawyers to keep me away from my niece, she said to the camera, tears streaming down her face. But money changes people in ways we can't always predict. The video disappeared after 24 hours, probably on advice from David's lawyer, but not before several of Elena's friends had captured and shared it, extending its reach beyond her immediate social circle. Mother called that evening the first time I'd heard from either parent since our confrontation. Sarah, this has gone too far, she said without preamble. Elena is devastated. She's done nothing but try to help you, and now you're treating her like a criminal. Mother, Elena has been harassing us. She's been posting lies about our family on social media and showing up at our house uninvited. The restraining order is necessary protection. Protection from your own sister, from people who love you, protection from people who are using their claimed love as a weapon to manipulate and control us. You've changed, Mia. This money has made you paranoid and cruel. I almost laughed at the irony. I've changed by learning to set boundaries and demand respect. If that seems cruel to you, it's because you're used to me accepting whatever treatment you offered without complaint. We raised you better than this. You raised me to accept being diminished. You raised me to be grateful for scraps of affection and approval. You didn't raise me to value myself or expect to be treated well. Mother was quiet for a long moment. Elena made some mistakes, she said finally, but she's family. Family forgives. Family works things out. Family also respects boundaries and treats each other with basic human dignity, I replied. Elena has shown no willingness to do either. What about Isabella? She deserves to know her family. Isabella deserves to grow up around people who respect her parents and model healthy relationships. If Elena can learn to do that, she's welcome in our lives. If she can't, then protecting Isabella from toxic family dynamics is more important than maintaining traditional relationships. The call ended badly, with Mother hanging up after telling me I was breaking the family apart over money and pride. 3 days later, Elena violated the restraining order by showing up at Isabella's pediatrician appointment. She'd somehow discovered our schedule and was waiting in the parking lot when we arrived, claiming she just wanted to see her niece and couldn't understand why legal papers were necessary between family members. The pediatrician's office called the police, who removed Elena from the property and documented the violation for our lawyer. Patricia advised us that we now had grounds for a more comprehensive legal response if necessary. Your family is testing whether you'll actually enforce the boundaries you've set, Patricia explained. This violation sends a clear message that they don't respect your legal protections. We can seek escalation if the behavior continues. That night, as I fed Isabella in our peaceful nursery, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just a few months. I'd gone from being the family disappointment to being the family target, from accepting scraps of conditional love to demanding respect and dignity. Are we doing the right thing? I asked Marcus as he settled into the chair beside me. We're protecting our family, he said firmly. We're showing Isabella that love doesn't come with conditions, that respect isn't optional, and that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who require the strongest boundaries. I never wanted it to come to legal action. I know, but Elena chose escalation at every step. We offered conversation, we offered clarity about our boundaries, we even offered financial help on our terms. She chose manipulation and harassment instead. He was right, but it still felt surreal to need legal protection from my own sister. Elena's desperation had transformed her from merely selfish and manipulative into something approaching dangerous, someone whose need for access to our resources overrode any consideration for our well-being or autonomy. The legal documents represented something more than just protection from harassment. They were evidence that I'd finally learned to value myself enough to defend against people who didn't, regardless of their relationship to me or their claims of love. Isabella finished nursing and settled against my chest, completely unaware of the family drama swirling around her young life. She would grow up knowing that her parents had chosen her well-being over social expectations, that they'd prioritized her safety over family harmony. She'd never have to wonder if we'll protect her, I said, kissing the top of Isabella's head. Never, Marcus agreed. She'd grow up knowing that love means action, not just words. The restraining order would stay in place until Elena demonstrated genuine change rather than strategic behavior modification. The cease and desist letter would remain a reminder that our privacy and dignity weren't negotiable. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a child is refuse to expose them to people who mistake manipulation for affection, who confuse control with care, who believe family relationships exempt them from basic human decency. Elena had chosen her path. Now Isabella would grow up on a different one entirely. 1 year later, I'm sitting in our garden watching Isabella take her first wobbly steps across the grass, her delighted laughter mixing with the sound of Marcus's voice as he cheers her on from his home office window. The family photo on our mantelpiece, the three of us in our new home, genuine smiles replacing the forced poses of the past captures. A moment of pure happiness that no amount of money could buy, but which financial security helped make possible. The restraining order expired 6 months ago. Elena never violated it again, and gradually, the social media campaign died down as her attention shifted to other sources of drama. We've had no contact with my parents since Mother's angry phone call, though Mrs. Rodriguez occasionally mentions seeing them at the grocery store, looking older and somehow smaller than I remember. Marcus's company, our company now, since I've officially joined as creative director, has grown beyond anything we imagined possible. The educational gaming platform we built together has been implemented in over 3,000 schools nationwide, helping children learn while having fun in ways that honor both entertainment and education. The work feels meaningful in a way that goes far beyond financial success. Mama, Isabella calls out, pointing excitedly at a butterfly that's landed on the garden fence. Her vocabulary is expanding daily, and every new word feels like a small miracle. I see it, baby girl, I call back, marveling at how much she's grown since that overwhelming day in the delivery room when everything changed. Isabella will grow up never doubting her worth or her place in the world. She know that her parents chose each other deliberately, fought for their dreams together, and built something beautiful from love and determination rather than obligation or convenience. She sees healthy relationships modeled daily rather than toxic dynamics disguised. As family loyalty, the money made everything easier, but it didn't make us happy. We were already that. It gave us choices, opportunities, and the freedom to be generous with causes we care about. But it didn't change the fundamental truth that our value came from how we treated each other, not from what we could afford to buy. Last month, we established a scholarship fund at the community college where Marcus and I met, specifically for students pursuing non-traditional career paths in technology and arts. Mrs. Rodriguez helps us select recipients, and seeing young people get opportunities to follow their creative passions feels like the best possible use of our unexpected wealth. Elena reached out once, about 6 months ago, through a mutual acquaintance who mentioned that she and David were getting divorced. The message was carefully neutral. She hoped we were well. She thought about Isabella often. She wondered if there might be a path toward rebuilding our relationship. Thought about it for weeks before responding through the same intermediary that we wished her well but weren't ready for contact. Maybe someday, if she demonstrated genuine change rather than strategic behavior modification, we could explore a different dynamic. But Isabella's well-being remained our priority, and we wouldn't expose her to relationships that might teach her that love comes with conditions. Sarah, Marcus calls from his office. Come see this. I pick up Isabella and carry her inside, where Marcus is showing me an email from a teacher in Ohio whose students have been using our educational platform. Listen to this, he says, reading from the screen. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Cardona, I wanted you to know that your math adventure game has completely transformed my classroom. Students who struggled with traditional learning methods are now eager to solve problems and explore new concepts. You've given these children a gift that goes far beyond education. You've shown them that learning can be joyful. These are the messages that make everything worthwhile, not the financial reports or acquisition offers or media coverage, but the evidence that our work is making a real difference in real children's lives. Isabella babbles and reaches for Marcus's keyboard, already drawn to the technology that's become such a central part of our family story. Whether she follows in our footsteps or chooses something completely different, she grew up knowing that meaningful work is possible, that creativity and commerce can coexist. that dreams pursued with determination and love can become reality. Evening, as we sit on our back porch, watching the sunset while Isabella plays with blocks nearby, I think about how dramatically my life has changed since that afternoon. When I discovered I was pregnant and worried about whether we could afford diapers. Do you ever miss it? Marcus asks, as if reading my thoughts. The simplicity of when we had nothing but each other. Sometimes, I admit, but not really. I miss the innocence of not knowing how complicated success could be, but I don't miss the anxiety about Isabella's future or the way my family treated us when they thought we had no value. No regrets about cutting ties with them? None, I say, and I'm surprised by how completely true that is. Isabella has grandparents who love her unconditionally, your parents. Mrs. Rodriguez, even Jake's parents who adopted us into their family. She doesn't need relationships that would teach her to question her worth. Marcus reaches for my hand, his thumb tracing over the wedding ring that's been joined by an anniversary band he gave me last month, not because we can afford expensive jewelry now, but because he wanted to mark our growth together. I love our life, he says simply. I love our life too, I agree. Watching Isabella carefully stack blocks with the focused concentration she inherited from both of us dot the delivery room feels like a lifetime ago. That moment when Marcus walked in and everything I thought I knew about our circumstances changed forever. But the most important revelation wasn't about money, it was about my own strength. My ability to demand respect, my willingness to protect the family we'd created together. Isabella will grow up knowing that her mother fought for her father's dreams, that her father saw her mother's worth when others couldn't, that her parents built something beautiful together through love and determination and mutual respect. She knows that family isn't about blood relations or social expectations, but about people who choose to love and support each other unconditionally. As the sun sets over our garden and Isabella begins to get sleepy in her daddy's arms, I feel the deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong, with exactly the people who matter most, living a life that honors both your dreams and your values. Ready for bedtime, little one? Marcus asks Isabella, who responds with a drowsy babbling that means she's ready for her evening routine. We go inside together. This family we've built from nothing but love and hope and stubborn determination to create something better than what either of us started with. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that success measured in love and respect and meaningful work is worth more than any amount of money. But tonight, in our home filled with genuine laughter and authentic happiness, surrounded by people who see our worth regardless of our bank balance, we have everything we ever dreamed of and more than we ever dared to hope for. Isabella's future is bright, not because we can afford to give her material advantages, but because she's growing up in a family that prioritizes love over appearance, authenticity over approval, dreams over security. She knows her worth not from external validation, but from the unshakable foundation of parents who chose each other and chose her with complete intention and joy. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that choose each other rather than the ones that share DNA. Sometimes the greatest wealth is knowing you're loved exactly as you are, not for what you can provide or achieve or become. And sometimes the little girl who was told she was too ugly to be a mother grows up to raise a daughter who will never question her own beauty, worth, or right to be loved completely and unconditionally. That's the real success story, not the money or the business or the media attention, but the breaking of cycles, the building of something better, the creation of love that has no conditions and no expiration date. Isabella Carmen Cardona will grow up knowing she's worthy of love simply because she exists, not because of what she achieves or how she looks or whom she impresses. And that knowledge will be worth more than any inheritance we could ever leave her.